I remember vividly the day my boss looked me square in the eye and said, "People like you aren't needed here. Just disappear." The venom in those words stung, but it wasn't the first time I had to endure such cruelty. Mary, the department head, had a knack for making people feel small, and every time we crossed paths, she ensured her words cut deep. Mary had a reputation for being nasty, especially toward those she considered beneath her. It was a reputation well earned. Over time, her constant jabs and condescension wore me down, and I finally reached my breaking point. But instead of lashing out, I forced a smile and replied with what she least expected: "Useless people should be fired, right?" To my surprise, she didn't sense the irony. Instead, her eyes lit up as she nodded in agreement. "Yeah, finally you get it," she said, completely oblivious to the fact that my words were as much about her as they were about anyone else. For a brief moment, Mary seemed to sense something was off, but she quickly dismissed it, flashing her usual nasty grin as her demeanor returned to its arrogant default. Little did she know that the very next day, at the shareholder meeting, her world would turn upside down. I could already envision the moment when Mary would be the one kneeling before me. But let me back up a little. My name is James Smith, a 41-year-old salaried employee who once had it all, only to see everything change when my father passed away from a stroke just before I graduated high school. My comfortable upbringing shattered overnight, leaving my mother and me in dire straits. My mother, with no work experience to speak of, suddenly found herself as the head of our household. I had a younger brother, far smarter than me, and our father's high hopes had always been pinned on him. It seemed only right that he would go to college, so I made a decision. I would forego further education and start working to support my family. I found a part-time job nearby, and after a few years of hard work and dedication, I was promoted to a full-time position. The company wasn't well-known or particularly well-paying, but it had a warm, friendly atmosphere. Despite my lack of a college degree, I was welcomed with open arms. Many of my colleagues were generous with their knowledge and advice, largely due to the influence of our company president, John Williams. President Williams was a man of remarkable character. Like me, he had also given up on college due to family circumstances and had started the company with a close friend. He always looked out for employees like me, who had only a high school or even middle school diploma. His caring nature earned him the respect of everyone in the company. He frequently invited us to meals and gave generous bonuses. It was no wonder that the atmosphere at work was so positive. At least, it had been before Mary Johnson came along. Mary was recruited as a department head due to her exceptional talent. She came from a wealthy family, had attended elite schools, and wasn't shy about flaunting her expensive accessories. She often bragged about her possessions, but her work attitude was appalling. She looked down on employees who didn't have prestigious degrees, treating those of us with only high school or middle school diplomas like servants. Her disdain for us was no secret, and unsurprisingly, she was avoided by nearly everyone. For some reason, Mary seemed to particularly dislike me. She made snide remarks whenever we met. "So, you only have a high school diploma? I don't need useless grads like you on my team," she would sneer. Hearing this day after day wore me down. One day, I asked her why she spoke so poorly of me, and her response was shocking. "Poor people with only a high school diploma are unpleasant to look at. I don't want you in my sight," she said with a level of disdain that left me speechless. From that point on, she never gave me meaningful work, only pointless tasks. Just yesterday, she handed me a broom and a rag, telling me to clean a storage room full of junk. "This room might be used someday. If you clean it now, it will be nice and tidy later. Even a useless high school grad like you can handle this," she insisted. I tried to explain that I was too busy with other tasks, but Mary wouldn't hear it. "Maybe someone else who's free can do it, or we can handle it during year-end cleaning," I suggested, bowing my head. Mary was furious. "Are you refusing a task from your superior? You need to restart your career from scratch," she shouted, shoving the broom and rag into my hands and standing guard as I began cleaning. After 10 minutes, Mary grew bored and said, "Do it as soon as you're told next time. I'll let you off the hook for today." Relieved, I returned to my actual work, but that was a mistake. A few hours later, Mary stormed into my office, shouting, "Why did you stop halfway? Don't you have any sense of responsibility? I held back my frustration, listened quietly, and was left mentally and physically exhausted. Everyone in the office wondered how Mary had become a department head. She had skillfully presented herself as a cheerful and kind elite during her interview, fooling the interviewers. Mary had a history of impressive achievements at her previous job, which earned her the department head role here. Her reputation for business management preceded her, and when she first joined us, she made a great impression on the president and other executives. In meetings, she was all smiles and very proactive. It was hard to believe that the person we saw in meetings was the same person who terrorized us in the office. When Mary initially arrived at our office, she was polite and professional, introducing herself as Johnson, the new department head, and expressing eagerness to work with us. We had high hopes for her, but as time passed, her true colors began to show. She started acting like a tyrant, flattering the higher-ups while treating her subordinates poorly. Her behavior created an atmosphere of fear and unhappiness among the employees, and some even wished for a new department head. The office atmosphere became tense, especially with recent thefts of employees' money and belongings. Despite our attempts to enforce locker use and remind people not to leave things unattended, the thefts continued. I was determined to catch the thief, but then a major incident occurred. One day, as I was about to leave for lunch, Mary stormed up to my desk and slammed a document down. "Don't think you can just go out for lunch. What are you going to do about this?" she demanded, thrusting an email and a client complaint at me. The email read, "Your products are of the worst quality, frequently damaged, and overpriced. We are terminating future business." I was shocked. Mary accused me of sending the email, but I had no memory of it. I pointed out that the email wasn't even from my address, but Mary was relentless. "Everyone else handling this client is a college graduate. Only someone like you would send such an offensive message." She insulted me, saying I was a menace to the company. Her accusations and insults pushed me past my limit. Instead of backing down was not an option. I resolved to use all my power to teach Mary a lesson. With a forced smile, I said, "Useless people should be fired, right?" Mary sensed something was off, but assumed I had accepted her opinion. She quickly returned to her arrogant self, sneering at me. From that moment on, she made snide comments like, "It's refreshing not to have a nuisance around," or, "I'm glad to be free from babysitting an incompetent employee." Her cluelessness only made me want to laugh. The next day, the company held its shareholder meeting. When I arrived at the venue, Mary spotted me and angrily confronted me. "Why is a lowly employee like you here? This meeting is for insiders only." I calmly explained that I was instructed to attend, but Mary ignored me and began pushing me out, saying, "Get out before you bother the president." As I was being pushed out and unsure of how to stay, the president arrived just as the shareholder meeting was about to start. Mary interrupted my explanation and, with a polite smile, said to him, "This is James Smith. He was trying to attend the meeting without knowing his place. I was just sending him away." The president's expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" he said, turning to me. "Smith here holds 90% of the company's shares as a special controlling shareholder. Of course, he has to attend the shareholder meeting." Mary's face turned pale as she stared at me, trembling. When I slowly nodded, she let out a short scream and collapsed on the spot. In reality, I own 90% of the shares of the company I worked for. A shareholder holding over 90% of the shares is called a special controlling shareholder, a powerful figure with the right to demand that all other shareholders sell their shares through a board resolution. This fact was known to employees at the manager level and above, but Mary was unaware. She had made herself disliked by acting high and mighty right after joining the company, so no one bothered to inform her about the details. Mary sat on the floor, mumbling to herself in complete confusion. Unable to watch any longer, the president began to explain. This company was actually founded by my father, who served as its president. However, when I was in high school, he suddenly passed away from a stroke. His best friend, who was the vice president at the time, took over as president. He also arranged for me to join the company immediately after graduating from high school to groom me as the next president. There were discussions about making me president right away, but it was decided that it would be better for me to gain experience first, to avoid risking the company and its employees due to my inexperience. So, I inherited 90% of the company shares from my father and worked on the ground while learning management skills from the president. My smarter younger brother graduated from college and now works as the executive vice president. I'm glad to see Smith has developed into a competent leader. I'm considering stepping down as president, and I told you this when you joined. Mary struggled to get up, mumbling incoherently. It seems you weren't paying attention. I just assumed he was an incompetent, low-educated person, she said, clearly shocked by my true identity. Mary inadvertently let her true feelings slip and was immediately reprimanded by the president. Watch your language, he said sternly. A person's worth is not determined by their educational background. But I think it's wrong for Smith to hold 90% of the shares, Mary argued, instead of reflecting on her behavior. It's just because he's the son of the former president that he holds 90% of the shares. I'm much more competent and contribute more to the company. Judge by ability. I was utterly astonished that she would declare herself so superior. The president seemed to feel the same way, letting out a deep sigh before speaking in a low voice. Smith is far more competent than you. He listens to the employees' needs, constantly improves operations, and boosts workplace morale. I do that too. Mary tried to compete, only making the president angrier. Don't be ridiculous. Do you think I'm unaware? I've heard reports that you're harassing other employees instead of boosting morale. The president's face hardened as he began to reprimand Mary for her behavior. You put on a good face for me in upper management, but I've been informed about your horrible treatment of subordinates, looking down on people based on their education, assigning unnecessary tasks, and disrupting their actual work that was meant to help them grow their abilities. Mary continued with her weak excuses, but the president wasn't buying it. Enough. You don't need to say anything more. Besides, you are neither an executive nor a shareholder, so you don't need to attend the shareholder meeting. I already sent an email about this. What? I thought it was a mistake. I'm an extremely competent employee, right? Mary protested. I figured the president must have made an error in the recipient list. I was eager to attend today. To assume the president made a mistake and then crash the shareholder meeting. This showed just how brazen Mary was. The president sighed deeply and turned his back to her. Regardless, you weren't invited today. I'll be calling you in tomorrow, so go home for now. But I'm a highly valued department head. I'm essential for the shareholder meeting, Mary persisted. The president sternly ordered her to leave, and she finally obeyed. As I watched the entire scene unfold, I was utterly astonished. The president, who was usually known for his gentle demeanor and for treating employees like family, was uncharacteristically furious. In all the years I had known him, I had never seen him so angry. It was clear that this incident had struck a deep chord within him. Once the shareholder meeting concluded without further issues, I gathered my things and prepared to head home. It had been a hectic day, especially with Mary's interruption and the president's outburst, so I was looking forward to unwinding once I got home. Little did I know, another unexpected incident was waiting for me. As I left the venue and made my way toward the taxi stand, I suddenly heard hurried footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw Mary sprinting toward me. She quickly caught up and positioned herself directly in front of me, blocking my path. She was breathing heavily but wore a strange grin on her face. "Oh good, I made it in time," she said. I was puzzled. "Why are you here? I thought you had left already." Could she have been lingering outside until the shareholder meeting was over? Despite my suspicions, Mary ignored my questioning look and began speaking, her face twisted into an unsettling smile. "The president said he'd call me in tomorrow, but I have a bad feeling about it," she began. "I thought I'd ask you for a favor, Mr. Smith." I didn't like where this was going, and it must have shown on my face because Mary suddenly bowed deeply. "I'm sorry for everything I've said and done. I'm apologizing. So could you please say some nice things about me to the president?" It was clear to me that her apology wasn't sincere. She was only trying to avoid blame. "You're not apologizing because you feel bad. You just want to escape the consequences," I said, firmly rejecting her plea. I tried to leave, but Mary spread her arms wide, blocking my way again. She continued to bow repeatedly, her arms raised in a bizarre and almost theatrical manner, drawing attention from passers-by. It was a busy street, and the stares from people walking by were painfully obvious. Children started giggling at her odd behavior, which finally seemed to make Mary realize how embarrassing she looked. Before she left, she shouted, "Anyway, make sure to support me tomorrow. I'm your boss, remember?" Then she ran off as quickly as she had come. As she fled, she tripped spectacularly, drawing even more attention. But I pretended not to notice and quietly made my way home. The next day, when I arrived at work, Mary approached me with her leg wrapped in a bandage. "I hurt myself after I fell yesterday. I scraped my leg and got bruises." "It was awful," she said, trying to garner sympathy. I responded coldly, "Is that so? What a misfortune." Had it been anyone else, I might have shown concern, but considering everything she had done to me, I felt no sympathy. More importantly, I reminded her, "Doesn't the president have something important to discuss with you today?" Mary's expression changed, and she replied, "Right? I was told to go to the president's office as soon as I arrived." Since I had also been summoned by the president, I reluctantly accompanied her. She kept complaining about her foot pain and insisted on walking slowly, which was really annoying. Throughout this ordeal, she never once apologized to me, which only reinforced my decision not to forgive her. When I knocked on the president's door and entered, we were met with the sternest expression I had ever seen from him. The moment she saw the president, Mary straightened up, acting as if she had never been complaining about her pain. "Good morning, Mr. President. What can I do for you today?" she asked with feigned politeness. Anyone who hadn't witnessed the previous day's events might have thought she was a polite and respectful employee. However, the president wasn't fooled and looked at her with a cold stare. "It's too late to try and fix your attitude," he said firmly. "Your punishment has already been decided." "Punishment?" Mary turned pale, her voice trembling. "What do you mean by punishment?" Without hesitation, the president continued, "You are being dismissed for misconduct. We no longer need you at this company." "You mean I'm fired? This punishment is too harsh." Mary protested, attempting to approach the president, but she stumbled, clearly still in pain from her injured leg. The president remained unfazed and calmly continued his explanation. "As for the reasons for your dismissal, the first is your harassment of subordinates. I haven't harassed anyone. I admit I've been strict, but it was only to train my subordinates." Mary boldly insisted on her innocence, despite having me as a witness right beside her. The president furrowed his brow and pulled out a voice recorder. "This voice recorder contains your abusive remarks," he said, pressing play. As Mary's familiar nasty comments played back, her face grew even paler. "Did I really say all that?" she whispered, seemingly in shock. "Yes, you did," I responded. "Both I and the other employees endured your abuse every day. Can you understand our suffering and anger?" My words seemed to cause Mary to waver. "I'm sorry," she muttered. It was the first genuine apology I had ever heard from her, but her offenses didn't end there. "The second reason for your dismissal," the president continued, "is that you caused trouble for our clients. Just ask Harris Smith." He then produced a document detailing the email incident from the day before the shareholder meeting. "An investigation of our company computers revealed that the email was sent from your computer. Do you have any explanation for this?" Faced with irrefutable evidence, Mary finally confessed, "I'm sorry. I wrote that email." Mary, who had reluctantly admitted her guilt, finally began to speak in a low, hesitant voice. She explained why she had harassed me so relentlessly over time. "I worked hard to graduate from an elite university," she began, her voice trembling, "and I struggled to become a department head. But Smith, with only a high school diploma, was well liked by the other employees. It made me so angry, so I thought I'd scare him a little. It was just a prank. I didn't mean any harm." Her explanation, full of self-centered reasoning, made the president sigh in frustration. "Don't make childish excuses," he admonished. "And what about the third reason for your dismissal?" The president then displayed footage from the security cameras installed in the office. The video clearly showed Mary sneaking around and rummaging through the office, searching for valuables. As the footage played, Mary's face turned pale. Her earlier remorseful demeanor quickly vanished, replaced by a nervous sweat as she desperately questioned the president. But I checked all the security camera positions. I shouldn't be on tape. Recently, employees' wallets and personal belongings have been going missing, so we installed additional security cameras, the president explained. Even as a department head, you resorted to theft. What were you thinking? Faced with this new accusation, Mary's strength left her. She slumped to the floor, hanging her head as tears began to flow. After a moment, she finally started to confess. The truth is, she admitted between sobs, I bought too many luxury items and went into debt. The repayment deadline was coming up, and my parents refused to help me anymore. So, I resorted to stealing from the employees. Hearing this, I was stunned. I had no idea that Mary had been buying luxury goods on credit, nor that she was in such a desperate financial situation after being abandoned by her family. Why didn't you just sell the luxury items? I muttered under my breath. Mary's tears flowed even more freely as she responded, I did sell them, but they said they weren't popular, or they had scratches, so they didn't bring in much money. I had initially hesitated to dismiss her, thinking there might be some deeper reason behind her actions. But after hearing her side of the story and reviewing the evidence from the voice recorder and security cameras, it became clear that her motives were petty and selfish. She was far worse than I had imagined. It had taken considerable effort to gather all the evidence, but I was glad I had consulted with the president and that we had made the right decision. As I delivered my final words to her, I said, Mary, please reflect on your actions and atone for your sins. She cried and apologized, but I couldn't believe her words until she had truly paid for what she had done. Afterward, we consulted the police about Mary, and she ended up with a criminal record. A thorough investigation revealed that she had even stolen from donation boxes at temples and shrines, which ultimately led to her imprisonment. I hope she sincerely reflects on her actions and atones for her crimes during her time in jail. Meanwhile, I spent my final year of training as Mr. Williams' secretary before finally becoming the president of the company. Moving forward, I plan to continue valuing employee performance over educational background and aim to create a rewarding workplace for everyone. My brother, who was the executive vice president, has now become the vice president and is my indispensable right-hand man. His dedication inspires me to keep striving, and I look forward to working with him and the rest of the team to cherish both the company and its employees.